we're looking at the Battle of Marignano. It's an interesting one. We'll talk about it in a moment, but I want to point out I screwed up the last battle. And this might have actually really helped the French. I couldn't differentiate between these pink bands and the orange bands that were really deployed close to each other, and allowed the artillery with the orange band to fire anytime I was activating the pink. That completely changed how the battle would have gone. There were times when I was able to rally units and fire my artillery at the same time when I wouldn't have wanted to otherwise. And I also ended up overusing those pink band units because, hey, I might as well keep using them because I got the artillery in with them. Oh well, that might have made it a little bit more of an even fight. Anyway, as to this one, this is an interesting one, and a number of these, and actually a number of, a number of games that I've played throughout, the time that I've been videoing, it always kind of strike me as, hey, this is, this is a key event happening in Europa Universalis, not just the big ones like, 30 Years' War or something. This particular one is the battle in which the Swiss signed their, permanent peace with France and start giving them the opportunity to get mercenaries. Essentially, the Swiss have gone down, and occupied Milan? I don't know. And they're here on the offensive against Francis I. This is also probably Francis I's greatest victory. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see about that. But anyway, what we have is what looks like a pretty damn big pile of troops and a bunch of reinforcements coming. More than that, this is going to be a 2-day battle. Hey, how do you do that with, without keeping track of time? You'll see. In terms of the troops, the Swiss are all pike armed with arquebuses and pretty decent quality units. The French, more of a polyglot army, a lot of pike, none of them Swiss pike, but some sword and buckler to handle that. A lot of artillery stretching all the way around, which there may be enough to cause problems, but there's no artillery leader, which means you have to use a free activation if you want to hit with them. And then, yeah, sort of a mixed army with some crossbows, pike with arquebus, sword and buckler with arquebus. Sword and bucklers are obviously going to be my best units. I got a couple of knights too, for what that matters. But, okay. So, the Swiss get an initial bonus. All their continuation die rolls will have a -2 on them for the first day while it's light. They're really fired up here. They don't have to worry about the Swiss reluctance roll for the first day. The Swiss start things off. The terrain in this, so it's kind of hard to see, but there are a lot of villages and castles and stuff in this, but also the clear terrain isn't as clear as it looks. This one, unfortunately, is inside, which always causes a little bit of a problem. I don't know if there's a good way to reach this. Anyway, you'll see the clear terrain, hey, wait, it's expensive for artillery, but what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is no units can charge in this game, and the only counter charges that are allowed is when you're adjacent to the enemy, because this is so broken up by small fields and crap like that. The roads here are elevated, which makes them a little harder to enter. The villages and castles kind of expensive to move into, in good defensive terrain. There are no rivers. Irrigation stream. Can't charge anyway, so it's not that big a deal. And I guess that's about it for anything special. There's a bridge with a note here. Use the stream hex side cost because the pike units are too big to cross the bridges. Have to remember that. Okay. Let's keep looking at these. End of the day. Okay, so in order to handle the end of the day, darkness will happen at the end of the 6th activation after this dude, Catsy, comes on the board. And we have a special little marker to keep track of that. That's 6th continuous activation. It's not free activations or anything like that. Now, there'll be no missile fire at ranges of 3 or greater. Command ranges will be halved. All units have their movement allowance dropped by 1. And during every activation when darkness is in effect, you roll 2 dice. And if you get a 17 or more, remember zeros are zeros, we've stopped fighting for the night. At that point, the Swiss player has a possibility of desertions, and then each player gets to move their units up to 3 movement points. They can't move within 4 hexes of an enemy. If they're already within that, they can move away though. If you disengage, you're not disordered. There's no missile, there's no combat basically. If a disordered unit which is not adjacent to an enemy doesn't move during this, it's automatically rallied. After those units are rallied, the standard is automatically activated and rallies all the retired units. Okay. So the Swiss, like I said, during the first day, so between the 2 days, the Swiss have a possibility of deserting. Each pike unit they have, including those that haven't entered the game, on an 8 or more, leaves the game, and it doesn't count against flight points or anything. If you roll really terribly here, it might be possible that the Swiss can't lose the game. Okay, that's a problem. If the Swiss are adjacent to their overall commander, they subtract 1 from their die roll. This is going to be a timed engagement on the 12 spaces counting against the Swiss. And I guess that's about it. Now, the flight levels are fairly high, 75 for the French, 45 for the Swiss. What's more than that, when the Swiss bring their reinforcements on, they get an additional 40 points. When the French bring their first set of reinforcements in, they get an additional 30, which brings them up to the top of the very chart. So this may be sort of the biggest battle, or the largest number of units in the battle. There's a little bit of whining and complaining here. Let's see. If the Swiss player decides not to enter Catsy's brigade onto the or battle onto the board, slap him with a maggoty biscuit and run the time marker out. Well, maybe, maybe not. If the Swiss are able to win the game with these guys, they don't have to cause Nightfall, right? So there's something kind of funky about that. We'll see what they're able to do. I don't expect them to be able to just overrun the French terribly. First of all, they're facing stuff that's can outmaneuver them in terms of the SBs, the crossbows, the men-at-arms, but they're not terribly useful. They're facing the artillery that they're going to wade up through. I just don't see that they're going to be able to break that big French 75. Oh, I haven't explained how the French come in. So free activation, you can bring d'Alençon in. Now, he's a lousy leader, so the French may not want to bring him in, but the problem is on the second day, they can bring this other group, though, d'Alviano. He's got some Italians there. He's a better leader, less troops, but leadership's so important in this system that bringing a bunch of troops who don't have a good leader on the board doesn't seem all that appealing. I've got a lot of French on here. Unless I start losing them, I don't see that there's too much trouble. Let's put this, I don't know, say here. And I haven't looked at my chits. Let's see what we got here. Seizure, battle cry. We didn't even use, ooh, a seizure negation finally. Into the breach and a seizure. So, I guess we're about ready to start, but that'll be for tomorrow. All right, well, the Swiss opened things up with an army activation because we've got kind of an approach going on, and they did not get a continuation. So for the French, I have to do a little thinking here. I could fire my artillery, and that's sort of the natural thing to do. But at their current range, basically, the heavy cannon I have are way back here, so that they'd have some chance of doing something. So they wouldn't be firing in. But they go out to 25. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. But they'd be at -5. They can't possibly hit. They can't roll badly enough or well enough to hit there. These guys would basically need a 10 to disorganize. So that leaves me to what other options do I have? You know, pop off a time marker, and let me make sure the time is correct at 12. Yeah. Maybe, you know, or try to move to protect this flank that looks really, really weak, which sounds to me like the better move. Unfortunately, this force in the center, well, I can cover those guns, so that may be my best move. Part of Orleans' command is over here. I'm sending that forward to threaten the flank. That's going to force the Swiss to react to that, and if they end up fighting in front of the guns, that's terrible. So we'll see what's going on there. I can't do an army command this time with the Swiss because I'll be moving closer within the 4 hexes, I think. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so pretty much no matter what, I'm going to be trying kind of an oblique to get in so that I can smack them in the flank. With a couple of continuations over there. We got plowing in, hitting some of the guns, and making things very unpleasant over on that flank. And for a small rules change, as per the rules, these guys here who are stacked with a different battle, neither one can change facing, because I can only accept as a result of a retreat or something like that. But as of right now, neither of those units can change facing. I cannot combine those two battles to move, and it seems reasonable to me that at least the sword and buckler guys should be able to turn and face their enemy, and certainly the artillery could if it was on its own. I'm not asking to be able to fire both. It's just this is a situation where I have units, birdie, of two different commands, and they cannot be in any kind of cooperation due to the system. So, you know, sometimes you find things around the edge that you don't like what the system is. Is it unreasonable that, you know, is it possible that they shouldn't be allowed to face, which is how the rules are written? Yeah, it's possible that's intended, but I don't buy it as being a reasonable solution. No. A little probe attempted by some of the pikes, well, that got busted away pretty easily. The combination of better firepower. I think I neglected an opportunity to shoot at some of those crossbowmen. Let me take it. -3, -1. Might have prevented an elimination there. I forgot those pikes are armed. Not high enough, so I'll let this stand. Managed to blow away 2 of the pikes using a combination of firepower and, in this case, marching in with the sword and buckler guys supporting it. and flanking and everything. So that's 10 quick points gone. Right away we're beginning to see, hey, you know, maybe these Swiss aren't so hot. And really, there's all kind of disadvantages for being Swiss. So, like, I don't know that their units have a good melee capability. That's about the only thing going for them, is they have a lot of units with a good negative there. Did not get my continuation to be able to move Francis forward, which means, you know, I'm not clearing way to start bringing in the garbage that I don't really want to bring in, but feel like I probably should at some point. Continue to push forward. They got 2 continuations, so we were able to move our secondary line in place, and then these guys attacked twice. You can see they're getting a little bit of pain because they're taking fire as they're coming in. Of course, they can then return the fire without it being re-returned now that the crossbow's out of the way. But it's not exactly a good-looking situation. The only thing in our favor is, hey, we might be able to sweep around and hit from both, you know, from front and behind, and really wreck those units tailing over there, because the French haven't really been able to get a lot of action moving. Chances of that, I think, are fairly low, though. I've got, you know, these guys able to move up. Unfortunately, they're, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're not in command, so they're not going to be able to engage yet, which is somewhat troublesome and might be a reason to consider throwing some firepower. If I could have gotten a guy here, moved my infantry a little closer, I would have been able to have them all in range. You know, sometimes you lose these games by little mistakes like that you wouldn't think. Points, though, hey, they're about even now. We killed a couple of well, we killed 1 French pike. But also the crossbowmen got wiped out that were in the way there. Finally, we're beginning to see the kind of head-on charge of units from the French, of all people, who aren't on the time constraint, but that maybe we see in most of the other Men of Iron series. We certainly saw them in Blood and Roses. I think this is the first time I've seen this in Arquebus, where there's just units hitting all over the place. And it's because there's big formations. I guess the last scenario where the French could combine, you know, 2 or 3 of their units together could have allowed for that. But the circumstances weren't desirable for me to do that. So here, these aren't necessarily good attacks, though. We're charging into the Swiss. They're getting first fire. They got first fire on us, essentially, and that's the way to think of this, because those pike and sword and buckler units have some arquebuses included, and so they're allowed to fire when you advance on them, but they're not allowed to fire return fire. So they get to shoot, and then you get to shoot. And it's kind of it's something that's familiar from other games, you know. It doesn't apply to most of the Men of Iron series, though. Most of them, you move up, they get to shoot you, then you shoot them simultaneously. So, of course, in those cases, you usually just pick, I'm not going to send my archers up to go charge their archers, because that's suicidal. Not sure what to do with my cav so far. Anyway, I'll come back. We're on the 2nd continuation already, so it's quite likely I'll be back right after this is resolved. If not, these guys will have moved forward a little bit more. The results were not overall fantastic, but I did manage to slap a couple more Swiss big units, and we got the points up to 43. However, there's no roll, because it's not the end of a free activation there, and now the Swiss have their free activation, and at this point they're being forced to bring in their additional force, because otherwise they'll be losing the game immediately. And that means I'll be bringing in Catsey's Battle and that'll give me 40 more flight points to lose. Unfortunately, the French were in a position where they could have kind of been clobbered by this unit. A lot of disorganized units. Did not get a continuation. I absolutely had to do this, though. It's the only way to keep me in the game. So those units are coming on, and now the French get their free activation, and they will probably be pulling back all along the front because they did a pretty impressive and heavy attack, which, you know, got the Swiss up to that horrible point value, but left them kind of not able to continue with the initiative. They're spread rather thin and not in the best of locations. And if the battle starts to turn now, which I don't think it will necessarily, but if it does, and starts to go in favor of the Swiss, the French do still have their reinforcement, which brings them, what, 30 more points, I think, to get them up to that 105. I do have to put this in play, though, because we got, well, let's put it here. We got 6 activations before night falls, and then the special night rolls start taking effect. The problem as we look at the board here is, yeah, that's not right, but I'm using up more counters because of the large formations now, and obviously, you know, use more markers, more formation, but for example, the no move, no fires, those have all run out already. I could use other things, obviously. The shocks are fairly low. There's like 3 of them left, and I think I'm using only charges, which are on the other side. So the shocks have these retired markers, and the charges have them too. Because most of the battles in this particular box have smaller formations, there tends to be a cycling, and these counters are all things that, you know, you use just on your activation. The retireds, you know, a big battle could cause a fair number of retireds, but most of these battles actually don't eat up that many because there tends to just be 1 flag for each side. I don't think I've seen a battle yet where there was more than 1 flag for a side. The French have a couple of flags, but I think they're just intended to be used in different battles. Like they have the king flag and the normal flag. Doesn't seem to be any battles that use both. This is different from most of the games in the series. Most of them have multiple flags, which means you could end up using more counters. So maybe part of the decision to give so few flags was a counter mix decision, because giving more flags means they have to give more retired markers. I don't know. Anyway, this is the rather limited attacks that the French are making right now. And you can see I've got disordered units in the front. Those are guys who kind of charged forward and got shot up on the way in. And it's one of the difficulties in attacking in this one is there's so much firepower on both sides. Get further into these scenarios and the technology improves. It's definitely the case that the defense starts improving. Well, you know, in some cases, hey, these are Swiss pikes, you know, they're pretty good on defense, period. But, and they have very strong defensive ratings compared to the French, actually, who are supposed to have smaller units, which is why smaller formations that are going to break easier, which is part of the intuition there. But also there's that defensive fire from every unit, you know, that makes the attack much harder. And we're entering more into that musket and pike era. What we're not seeing here is where the cav has the kind of superiority over the pikes yet. It's really not, you know, that Gustavus era cavalry coming into play here, which is cool. I am finding this an interesting compromise and an image of the thing, of a period that, you know, is sort of that leading into the musket and pike that I'm not used to seeing. Anyway, we've marked one of those off because the French did not get a continuation. And now the Swiss have interesting choices. Obviously, I'm not that interested in getting these guys forward, although they're not uninteresting, but I'm engaged all over the place. And this is the problem with littler battles. I've got 2 battles facing 1 French battle. So I don't really have any discretion. I have to keep switching back and forth between these 2, even though one's kind of weak and I'd like to get it out of the way. I could just ignore it and march forward, but nighttime's falling, so, there's a movement at night that's kind of free. That'll get me, it's only three movement points, but still, that'll get me some of the distance that the pike can make anyway. I'm tempted towards hitting here first, just because there's so many French units that are weak there. Yes, I've got a couple at risk here, but I'd like to get the French numbers, into the ugly zone. So they have to bring their crappy reinforcements in. I don't know. I don't think I have much chance of breaking the French, but I don't have much chance of avoiding being broken either if I can't break them. And the Swiss activation, the second one over there. They pushed a little bit, chunked that up to 16, but they're not really getting the kind of again, it's hard to attack in this. They're not getting the kind of massive attacks they want. The way to get that is really to get the continuations, get a couple of continuations. And we were kind of hoping, but it didn't work out that way. And now the French have it again. And we got a little bit of problem here. I can't withdraw from there, which sucks. I'm engaged. I'm not allowed to attack, so I'm not forced to attack, because those are just cross movement, but it does cause a problem. Now, if I can shoot those guys out of there first, then I can withdraw. So there's one way for me to get out of there, but all these pikes and everything, they're going to try to back away, I think, the ones that aren't healing themselves. How important is it to heal yourself? Well, night's coming, which can prevent that, and I'm forgetting the rules. This is night, isn't it? Or is it 6 until night? I don't remember. 6 activations after darkness happens. And then there's a roll to see if we go to the full night when people withdraw. So yeah, I don't have darkness yet. And darkness requires a 17. No, the post-darkness roll requires a 17 or higher to end things, which means, geez, what is that? That's not very good at all. That's like, let's see, we've got 100 different number chances, and pair of 9s, 8 and 9, 8 and 9. So 3 out of 100. So we got a 3% chance of the battle ending on any given darkness turn. That seems a little less than I would have thought. I wasn't really considering it, but yeah, because zeros are zeros. Just to the point I was mentioning, I'm using this entrench to mark that these guys were out of command. I really should have moved my general somewhere. He's still not going to be in range to take this flank into command, but that's okay. So both sides had kind of a problem here. The French, of their own engineering, they only had 1 space left on their standard after moving, what is it? Oh no, 2 spaces. So you got, no, this space is filled. Yeah, just 1 space. But the Swiss got theirs filled up and actually lost at least 1 big unit due to that. And their points are now up to 72. They're only 13 away from the complete collapse and getting close to the die roll time. Now, obviously, these guys are going to recover if night actually ever falls. But the attacks have cleared up this flank and have made a puncture here, and they're doing pretty well. Initiative's back in the Swiss hands. French have most of the board, so. And this is the last round before darkness. this battle will probably go on through the night, at least for quite a while. Let's look at what the darkness means. No missile fire at ranges of 3 or greater. We haven't been seeing much of that anyway. Command ranges are halved. That's a big deal. So this guy's got a command range of 4. He can only command these 2 units and the one he's stacked with because he ran away. Chasing down some French, killing them off. You can see the French number has gotten up quite high. And that's not because of this. These were legitimate kills, actually. This is full, but okay. So let's see. What other things? Movement allowances are reduced by 1. Well, that's going to be great for these pike units. And at the start of each activation, we roll 2 dice. And if we get a 7, or more, the activation ends. The turn ends for the day. We actually haven't hit that activation. Let's do the Swiss chance of a rally. I'm gonna, or of an activation. I'm gonna go for continuation there. And that does not work. So it's gonna go over to the French, assuming we don't get a 17. With that 9, we had more of a chance than normal. We do not. So we're gonna have a French activation here. And you know, things haven't changed that much. The darkness doesn't do all that much to the game, actually. Played their flag. Night didn't end. And now the Swiss get their free activation. And this is much, much more questionable as to what I want to do. You know, I don't have a lot in command, so I'm not going to be doing any charges or anything. But this force is so weak and small, the only real reason to move it is to get off my standard. I don't think it's a big deal. It's tough call. I got some points here that I could grab. But again, I only get these 2 units to throw in. One of them can slam into that from this flank. And one of them, God knows. And then the rest is just, you know, rallying or firing or whatever. Just made some good ground off their free activation. Rallying, some of the firepower was effective. Not as much as it could have been. These guys could have been killed if things had gone a little better, but we smashed into there. Got a continuation. Hey, fantastic. Now I rolled a 17. I'm glad because I don't know how long it would have taken. You know, it could have taken quite a long time to end that. But I'm not glad because the Swiss really don't want this to happen. What we're hitting is between the night. First, we have to check for the Swiss deserters, where we're going to be rolling for every pike. And what is it? On an 8 or more, it leaves the game without counting against anything. That includes any of them off map. And then everybody gets 3 movement points on board, which they can't close. And then the Swiss will begin the next day with the free activation, but they're going to be they're going to be reluctant Swiss, which means they may not fight. I think we had 4 Swiss pike desert. That doesn't affect the losses. And in fact, as I mentioned, if the Swiss lost all their units here, they might not be able to lose the game. I don't know what I would call that. I think I'd call that a draw at best. Anyway, at best, because they're actually serving a purpose here. The restrictions here can be taken very literally, and I've done so. I don't always favor that, and I've got some questions about them, but seems to be allowed is you can move your artillery. I made the error of pulling my Swiss back. Well, they had to pull back so that they were at least 4 away. So it wasn't that big a thing. It was kind of a required thing, And that meant that some of these French guns got to position themselves far away from the Swiss. These other guns moving forward probably don't mean a damn thing. And in fact, those guns don't mean much either, except the Swiss are still timed. If they don't bring their forces in, or if they don't try to defeat the French can just pass. However, the French feel pretty good. Another thing is it mentions units on the board, which means the remainder of this command didn't find its way on yet. And it can come on, eventually. But all right then. And I guess we start with a Swiss activation, and I don't know what to do. Let me think. The Swiss completed their movement, these guys, and they got. I had one unit I hadn't recovered. It had to pull back, I think. A little confused about what I actually did, but yeah, nobody was in. Neither of the banners had any units in retired mode when that went off, so nobody got any points back. But as it stands right now, the French have this whole force, which brings them up to here. They have almost no chance of falling. The Swiss are better than they were, but it's still 20 points away. That can happen real quick, 2 or 3 units, and the only thing going in their favor is the flanks of the French army are a little weak right now, until Francis actually makes it fully into the battle. Continuations, Francis is bringing his big battle up towards take on that flank, and Charles of Bourbon is trying to slide over, hoping to cover. This is clearly the French weak side at this point. A little earlier, hey, maybe both flanks were weak when the morning started, but now, and that means my worst leader, although perhaps some of the best troops, are heading this way. Let's see if the Swiss will engage. Instead of attacks there, I've rolled for the first Swiss. He's leaving. Again, doesn't count. This could be a way to win the game. Second one's gonna fight. He might be fighting 2 crossbowmen instead of 1. He's decided. Third one stands as well. So we get to swing. This guy just didn't fight. So, yeah, didn't roll. What is it, 9? I think they have to roll to run for the hills. It's 10 or more, which is pretty damn tough with the Swiss. There aren't a lot of them that flip over to be +1s. Forward into maximum firing range after engaging over here. Picking on those crossbowmen to not very much effect. This guy didn't attack, and left these guys hanging along with the flank, which certainly is not the best of things to have happen. Just sweeping through some horse archers, doing nothing. Mounted knights smashing into the back here. Got a continuation, charged forward. Obviously the firepower didn't go too well. They won the duel a bit over here, but the firepower over here didn't go too well for them. But they're still going to launch an attack with everyone. 2 of these against this, and then, some iffy attacks, some good ones. The basic view that we have is we can afford some casualties, but if we can, engage most of their line, we have better leaders, better chance of smashing things apart. I should probably put him somewhere where he'll be useful. Let's put him here. Yeah, this kill would be good. Yeah, the French took some punishment, but again, they got another kill, which puts them up to 73. They're almost within range of die rolls. They got a bunch of Swiss engaged that are going to be a pain in the ass. Some of them, like this, that's probably a French loss, but that's okay. You're going to walk right in front of those cannons. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Chits were spent on a seizure and a seizure negation. Other than that, I don't know. Into the breach is just a +1 in combat, so I'll probably never use that because I forget it all the time. I think that's about it for tonight. I'm fatigued emotionally between the movers, coping with that, and you know, it's not the only thing, right? Like my life is usually this nice clean pattern, and I have these fears of things that I have to do in terms of fixing. But not only do I have the movers to deal with, but I also have to deal with trying to sell the place in Phoenix, and I'm afraid I'll fuck that up too, you know. And so the Swiss got one continuation. And they launched attacks over with these yellow guys, and I kind of cheated with them. I forgot to roll their reluctance rolls. Yeah. Let's say they had a momentary spurt of elan. They actually managed to destroy 3 or 4 French units, getting the point total up to like 52, which, you know, while not quite a threat, not quite a must bring the reserves on and get that up to 105, it might be the best move at this point. It doesn't look like there's anything where the French are really on the ropes. They kind of got wiped out where they were. The continuation was an attack here where these 2 units ganged up, fired on, and were about to shock, but then they decided not to. Both of them decided not to. Either one succeeding would have been good. And now we're back to the frogs. Actually, all the French get to do. Now that opens up the possibility of bringing these guys in, who have a better leader, a small force though, but a good one. Those are all sword and buckler units, which, you know, kind of have the edge on the Swiss pike, although the Swiss have their good defensive writings, which makes them impressive. I went for my continuation with Bourbon. So I want to get his command centralized over here. His command has just shrunk so much. And I'll have Francis keep on the right flank. And who's this? Alençon. Try to use him for the center. Ideally, you would have Francis in the center, because he would be able to apply his command bonus more likely, but his force is so big and it's in a particular position. It's kind of a hard call because Francis's forces could have done some damage, but I'd like to keep, you know, the 3 working commands instead of this is on the edge of just being made completely useless if I don't do something to save it. Yeah, I had a couple of choices, either finish the game or go out and, I don't know, the good cheer of the day. You can hear it in my voice, right? I'm trying to be quiet though. The good cheer of the day and the good feelings and everything led me, and I went out down to the store and hung out for a while there. So just doing this one activation, well, one set of activations, and the Swiss actually kicked some serious butt here. Starting in the center, picking on this, but mainly rallying some units. This didn't go too well. And then swinging down here, got some hits in, and then over here and killed another unit and got some hits in. Total kills, I don't remember, it was 2 or 3 units this turn. This phase gets the French up to 70. Yeah, they're way further back than the Swiss are. And shit, I forgot about the Swiss reluctance again. Oh well. But anyway, made some serious ground. And obviously, if I couldn't have gotten all those attacks off, and there were quite a few over the course of, 3 activations, this wouldn't have been as effective as it was. So we're giving kind of a half advantage to the Swiss, which is, I probably won't always remember, or I clearly don't always remember to roll that. I'm doing better on this one than in any of the other scenarios, though. Francis is starting to get fully engaged. I swept in with the light cav shot up things, pulled away, and the big advantage there is you only get one return fire with each unit. Not return fire, but reaction fire where you move in. So these guys can keep running into the same hex if it's off on a corner. One of them gets shot at, but the rest of them just get to fire their shots at will. Now that only applies to, that doesn't apply to longbows, crossbows I think it applies to. It doesn't apply to longbows and the horse archers. So they still have something kind of cool that they provide, but they have lower firepower capabilities here. Francis, like I said, has largely engaged. Some firing, some hits, and I think I forgot to attack there because I don't see any marker. So that's going to be an SB against a pike. I think I just forgot to put my marker down there. That'll be +1 for SB, +2 for angle of attack. So I'm at +3 against the disordered. We'll roll this here, because that's going to be an elimination and a continued attack, which means I'll be able to slam into that. So that's a 5-point piker. And the game might actually be over now. Let's check the leader. He survives. Drop him down. And then this, yeah, he's got it there. Okay, so now we've swept in. And now it's SB versus Pike, which is at +1. -1 for the continued attack, -2 for that pike unit capability. So it's a net of -2. Attacker disordered, retreats a hex. That's fine and dandy. So we didn't really see any great effect except this. And because this was the end of a free activation, if the Swiss roll a 7 or higher, the game's actually over. And it is. I made a lot of mistakes on this one, not just the Swiss. Not too surprised. I'm pretty sloppy. In part because this system's so lightweight that I tend towards kind of a sloppiness, and then this game has gotten to require all these lookups to make it, you know, more to handle all the special cases and all the different weapons types that are emerging. Anyway, it's a tough win for the Swiss, even with me cheating for them regularly. Let's send this one up.